Welcome back to Revolution Recap. I'm Sean Donahue, joined today by Greg Johnstone and Chris Valukas. We got a great episode for you today. We got to speak to Jon Bell, who was recently signed by the New England Revolution first team, and of course made some waves on Twitter with the Announce Jon Bell hashtag movement. So it was great to catch up with him shortly after he made his debut last weekend on Saturday in the preseason against the Galaxy. We'll play that one for you now, and then we have a couple of news stories we can catch up on after that interview. Joining us today on Revolution Recap is New England Revolution defender Jon Bell, who just recently signed a first-team contract with the New England Revolution after spending 2020 with Revolution 2. Jon, how are you feeling? How's the preseason going out there in Los Angeles?
It's been great. It's been really good, enjoying the weather and enjoying, playing along with, my new teammates and a couple of my old teammates from Revs 2. So it's been a pretty good preseason so far for me.
And you made your preseason first-team debut as a substitute against the Galaxy. How did you feel about your performance? What were your thoughts on kind of making your first-team debut in the preseason?
It was great. I was really eager to get on the field and, finally being able to do that. It felt awesome. Obviously we didn't come with the result that we wanted, but, coming in, as a defender, you're down 1-0, you want to keep it at that score. So, one takeaway I would take is, we didn't allow any goals, but, obviously there's always room for improvement, especially in the first game of preseason.
And where have you been training in preseason? I know naturally you've been a left back in the past, but you converted to a center back last season at Revs 2. Are you training mostly as a center back, or have you seen any time at left back?
I've been training as a center back since being with the first team in preseason.
And Bruce Arena mentioned that with less restrictions due to COVID this year, the first team and Revs 2 will train more often together, and there might be more players from the senior team that get minutes with Revs 2 like Justin Rennicks did last year. Do you have any sense, or is it going to talk to you at all if you'd be splitting some time between the senior team and Revs 2 this season?
Obviously, I hope for that to get that opportunity to get into the first team. Obviously, the depth chart is pretty big with our center backs, especially with Kessler coming back and AJ too. But I'm perfectly fine with, having to go back down to like Revs 2 and having to work my way, up the ranks to prove that, I can play with first team at an MLS level.
And you're one of three players from Revs 2 that got signed by the first team this year, along with Colin Verfuth and Maciel. For our listeners that didn't get to watch a lot of Revs 2 last season, can you talk about those two guys a little bit and the type of players they are and what we might expect to see from them this season?
They're honestly just, they're great guys, teammates off the field, and even better on the field. For a lot of people that don't know, like Maciel, like he's just he's a baller. Like if there was like a way to describe Maciel, like describe him as like the 3 C's. He's calm, he's cool, he's collective. He's always composed. He doesn't let the game get underneath him. He's always being relaxed on the ball. He makes the right decisions. And for Colin, he was a big part of my help transitioning into a center back last year. Just helping me out, making me feel comfortable playing in that spot. Colin's just a great leader on the field, vocal wise, and he's always in those right spots, and I try to learn off of him as much as I can.
Are there any other guys on Revs 2 that you played with last year that you think Revs fans should keep an eye on as someone that could make the jump to the first team in the future?
Yeah, I think Connor is one. He's playing obviously like outside of his position right now, usually a right winger, and he's taking on a big task of playing left back. And if people that watched against Galaxy on Saturday, he held his own really well playing on the left side as a right footer. And, I think Kobe too, he's still really young. And for him to be at this level, playing the way he is with a lot of confidence and style to it, I think for sure within the next year or two, Kobe's definitely going to make some noise.
And you spent some time in the DC United Academy. What was that experience like? And was there ever any talk about, potentially signing with DC either, before you graduated college or potentially signing with them as a homegrown later on?
It was a great experience. Obviously, I have to thank them just for, everything, because that's where a big part of growing and maturing as a player came from. Before I was there, I was a striker, and when I went to DC, I became a left back. And, being there at left back, it helped me get into a Division I school and helped me get drafted. So, there were, talks. I got the opportunity to train with the first team a lot when I was there. And even when I was still in college, I'd go back and play with the U23 team. So, there were talks, but obviously, it didn't work out that way. And, it is what it is, but, I still made it.
Yeah, John, talking about the draft, actually, whenever we have a guest on who went through the draft like yourself, we like to get their super draft story and what the process was like. For you, it was a little bit different than previous guests that we've had on. You were drafted in the second round, going 38th overall to San Jose. What was that experience like?
It was, a really great experience, especially for me because, I had gotten into the draft, pretty late in terms of the combine. I didn't do the MLS combine that they usually have. I actually went to like a different combine. It was the only one that I had gone to. That's a big shout out to just my agent who really helped me out to get into that pool to showcase my talent. And I was able to prove enough in the 3 days that I had out there to show an MLS team what I was capable of. And going to San Jose for preseason, it was a great experience because that was my first taste of being in a professional environment with MLS guys. So it was a great experience for me. I definitely grew a lot from it. I learned a lot from it too.
Were you expecting to be drafted?
I was. It's funny because, going into the draft, just because, I was coming from, a school that didn't participate in the tournament, my anticipation was just praying to get drafted in the third or fourth round. And the day of the draft, I spoke to my agent, and he was telling me, you made a lot of noise at that one combine, and, a lot of teams were calling about you. So I didn't even notice I got drafted. When I did, I was on the phone with my mom at the time, and next thing you know, my phone was blowing up saying I got drafted to San Jose. So it was a dope moment for me.
Now with the Revolution, you were signed to a USL contract right before the start of the 2020 season. How did that come about?
It was really after kind of, we're still in the pandemic and the leagues were starting back up again. And, I got called that, Revs needed a player. I didn't know it was going to be a center back, but, at that point, obviously not getting picked up by San Jose and struggling to find a team, with the seasons coming back, I was desperate to just to play again. And I didn't care where it was, and I didn't care what position I had to play. I just, wanted to be on the field. So, when I got that opportunity to fly up to Boston, I was all for it, and I was just ready to get to work.
For the 2021 season, I guess, what are your goals, personally and for the team?
For me, it's just becoming a better player, a better teammate, a better center back. Obviously I've grown into this position and I've gotten comfortable with it. So, at this point it's just, being a sponge, with the guys that I have around me, that are older than me. For myself, obviously I want to be on that MLS roster as much as I can. And, for the position I'm in right now, I have a great opportunity to showcase it, being on Revs 2 as well. I just have to, each time I get an opportunity to showcase, I just got to do what I have to do. Last year, being on Revs 2, I knew that, the first team were going to be looking at me and watching the games. And, it's going to be the same thing this year as well. So I just have to, keep that same energy and just go out there and give a hard work each time.
Well, and talking about Revs too, obviously the coaches and everything watching you, and we got to watch you, through ESPN Plus and everything like that. But of course, no one was able to attend any games, so there's a real, lack of atmosphere in the stadium. What was that like for you? Some players like to say that it doesn't affect them, others admit it does. I don't know. How do you feel about that, and how are you looking forward to seeing fans return to Gillette?
For me, fans have, being in an empty stadium, it doesn't really affect me. I'm just, once the game starts, I'm honestly just locked in. I don't really, focus on the outside noise. Obviously apart from, my coaches. But obviously it's going to be great to have fans back because, if there's one thing fans do, it's they do bring a lot of energy, to the team, the home team, and to the players as well. Just hearing, that voice and that chant and, the screams and excitement from, and the applause when you make a good play and stuff like that. So it's going to be great to have fans back in the stadium for sure.
Jon, our listeners who are on Twitter obviously know about the Announced Jon Bell hashtag, which for those who aren't on Twitter was essentially a handful of Revs fans and writers that were kind of pushing for your signing to the first team. What was your reaction to being one of the most popular figures of the offseason on Revs Twitter?
It's a really dope experience. I honestly didn't expect it. I was really just blessed that, I was getting a lot of, praise and recognition from guys, fans, who might not have been able to see me, just like you said, because of ESPN Plus and stuff like that. So for me, it was a really dope experience. I used it honestly as motivation for myself to, make that happen. I wanted to speak it into existence and having fans also on my side with, wanting to achieve that goal made it even better for me and a lot more satisfaction at the end of it.
When did you find out you were signing a contract with the senior team? It was announced last week, but some people, know that the Revs traded for your rights at the end of the season. Was that something that came about over the offseason? Did you learn you're being signed in preseason before you went out to LA? When did you get the good news?
It was during preseason, actually. I remember when I had gotten I saw that they had traded my rights, and for me it was just I'm one step closer to what I want to achieve. And I knew that coming into preseason that I was going to have to be able to showcase, what I can do on the field to prove that I deserve a spot on the team. So I found out, during preseason, not before. So.
And also during the Announced Jon Bell hashtag, obviously a lot of people were looking up obscure facts about you and trying to dig into anything that they could find. And one thing that I found was that you went to UMBC, and at UMBC there's also a mathematics professor named Jonathan Bell. So I have to ask you, have you ever had a class with Jonathan Bell?
No, I didn't. Nah. My major didn't require me to take a math class that high up in level, so sorry about that.
Did you ever know of him? I feel like you almost had to take the class for comedic effect.
Nah, that's the thing. I'm just, it's funny. I always find out how many Jonathan Bells are just it's a popular name. It seems so. But no, I never took that class.
I made the comment that I think UMBC leads the nation in Jon Bells. I also have to say, looking at your social media, I see you're a very big basketball fan, and you are a UMBC graduate. So I have to ask you, where does the UMBC Virginia 16-1 upset game rank among your favorite sports moments?
Oh, that's top 5. That was a really dope experience for a school. It's funny because whenever people find out I go to UMBC and they ask, how did the school react when it happened, it's we were all on spring break. No one was at school to, really celebrate. So campus was quiet during that whole weekend that it had happened.
I also got to ask, have you mentioned that game to Henry Kessler? Have you ever talked about it, or have you kind of avoided talking about it too soon?
I haven't even got the chance to meet him yet because, he was obviously with national team. But I'm definitely going to bring it up more than once just to rub it in on him.
Hey, Jon, I also have one more question because I was going through your social media looking for questions, and I take it you're a Ravens fan. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I noticed you're not a big fan of the Patriots. For context, I noticed on January 20th, 2019, you tweeted in all caps, "Why God? Why do you want the Patriots back in the Super Bowl?" I'm just curious, now that you're in Foxborough, any chance we can convert you to the dark side to become a Patriots fan? They have a great owner. I'm sure you'd agree with that. Yep. So any chance we can convert you to a Pats fan?
Yeah, I'm full Pats. I'm excited to see what they do. They got Cam back. They got a lot of good free agent. So, I'm always going to root for the team that I'm always root for my home team now because, obviously Boston's my home now.
And also I got to ask you too, your handle AstroBell23, is there any meaning behind that or any where does that moniker come from?
For me, growing up as a kid, I was a big fan of cartoons, and one of them was Astro Boy. Like that was like one of my favorite cartoons. I used to have like T-shirts and like action figures of him. So the name kind of just it sounded nice when you put Astro and Bell together. So it kind of just worked out that way, and Astro Bell 23.
And also, I mean, I'm guessing it's your favorite number, but you changed your number from 70 to 23. Is it just because 23 is your favorite number? Is it a Michael Jordan number? Is there any particular meaning to the number 23?
Yeah, I mean, 23 is like, it's one of those numbers that it's popular because of, one guy, Michael Jordan, and who was, obviously I'm a big basketball fan, so, that one Gatorade commercial, want to be like Mike. For me, getting 23 it's like big for me as a sports fan and as a basketball player. And, obviously, I'm also a big fan of LeBron too, and Beckham, who also picked 23, for the same reason, because of, Jordan. So for me, getting that number, it's special just because I've worn it since, I was really young. And also my dad, he also wore it when he played soccer in college too. So I'm just carrying it on.
Well, so John, we have a segment here called Extra Time where we put 60 seconds on the clock and we're going to run through some somewhat random rapid fire questions. Are you game to give this a go?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Feel free to skip anything if you can't think of an answer. But all right. Growing up, who was your sports idol?
Kobe Bryant.
If you could have any one superpower, what would it be?
Be able to fly.
Nice. What's your pregame meal?
I will say pregame meal probably pesto pasta with some chicken.
Xbox or PlayStation?
PlayStation.
Do you have any superstitions?
No.
Favorite non-MLS soccer club?
Liverpool.
Name a song on your current playlist.
Ooh. I will say Power, Kanye West.
All right. And lastly, pineapple on pizza.
Never.
All right.
Good man.
Thanks, Sean. You run the gamut there, so thank you.
Correct answer. All right, John.
I don't know how people do it, man. I just can't. I've tried it and I'll pass on every time.
I'm with you on that one. Before we let you go, what would you say has been your best experience as a soccer player to this point?
I honestly, I'd say, being able to achieve my goals. I'm one person that, when I put my mind to something, I really set out to achieve it. So, this for me would definitely be the biggest, just because, I had to get drafted and not to get signed, and then having to do a year of USL and then being able to get a second chance at it, speaking, what I wanted to do into existence and getting that MLS contract. So definitely that for sure.
Well, congrats again on getting that MLS contract. We're all excited to see you play this year. Good luck in the preseason and good luck this season.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
And that was New England Revolution defender Jon Bell, who signed with the first team just about a week ago now. Got to see him make his preseason debut against the LA Galaxy. A great interview with him. So, some news we can jump into too. One of which being Jon Bell signing last week. Greg, what else has happened since our last podcast?
Yeah, well, Jon Bell and Maciel signed. Maciel, a central midfielder who, if you listen to Bruce Arena's press conferences, he said a lot of really positive things about Maciel. And I know Jon Bell and Maciel both made their team debuts in the preseason last weekend. So I'd say that is the most recent news item to go over. It might be kind of minor moves. We're unsure of where these two players fit in the grand scheme of things. They might see some time in between Revs 1 and Revs 2, but I think it's a very solid rounding out of the roster, I would say. It seems like Maciel certainly could see some minutes and has proven some quality. And Jon Bell, we've talked about the lack of center back depth, and he might be very helpful there. It seems like he's still training at center back in preseason. So I don't know what your thoughts are on those two guys. Chris, any thoughts on Jon Bell and Maciel?
Yeah, I'm just happy to see, the pipeline working. We're getting these guys up and we're getting good depth pieces, which is, something that we need. I guess midfield, really, we didn't need that much additional depth, but Maciel, he's definitely a raw talent, and I did get to see him a bit, in that first preseason match on Saturday night, and he really impressed. He started with the first 11, and he went up against pretty solid LA opposition, and he performed very well. I don't have his stats in front of me, but the eye test, he 100% passed that. I was very impressed. And then Jon Bell, we've been talking about it so far all off season. We need more depth at the center back position. We were like, who do we have? If Henry Kessler goes down, is De La Garza going to be the guy? Verfuth. Now we have another name to add in that mix of Jon Bell. So I'm happy to see those two coming on.
Yeah, Chris makes a great point about Maciel. He got the start in the first preseason game. I don't read too much into the fact he got the start, but I do read into the fact that he performed really well. It's obviously a big step up to play at that level, and he looked very comfortable. It kind of fit with what Jon Bell was saying about him. Cool, calm, and collected in that performance from Maciel. So, like Chris said, I think central midfield is not a position the Revs needed depth in. It's a pretty crowded field, but you kind of get a sense from that preseason why, despite that, Maciel was one of the guys from Revs 2 that the team decided to promote and add to the first team. Again, I don't know where his minutes are going to come from this season. It's very crowded with Poster, Caldwell, Captoom, McNamara. It's going to be a fight for minutes back there, but he certainly showed promise in his preseason debut.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to Revs 2 already, even though we've had one kind of rough pandemic year where you wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of development. You have three guys that might come up and make an immediate impact between Jon Bell, Colin Verfuth, and Maciel. And Jon Bell and Verfuth, one of them at least is going to have to play some minutes in my mind. I don't think you're going to be able to go all year with just Kessler and Farrell, or just Kessler, Farrell, and De La Garza. So one of those two will be making an impact. And then Maciel, as you guys said, there's already a backlog in central midfield, so he's kind of worked his way into that conversation, is already impressing. So it's really just great to have Revs 2 and kind of provide that pipeline where you can take someone like Jon Bell, who was drafted to another team, sign him, develop him for a year, and then promote him to the senior team. So that's just very, very encouraging all the way around. And hopefully we see them out there and they continue to impress.
And I would add to that actually too. The Open Cup just released what the requirements are for MLS teams to qualify, and after the first 3 weeks of MLS play, the top 8 teams on the table are going to be qualified. And if the Revolution do that, which in my opinion they should be one of the top 8 teams, but depends on how they start, of course. But if they qualify for the Open Cup, that's going to be plenty of minutes for the depth guys.
And Bruce mentioned in his press conference today, we're recording this on Monday, he mentioned in his press conference today that he is always trying to build up fitness and have players at their peak fitness kind of towards the end of the year. And he talked about avoiding burnout. And one of the things he mentioned was that they're going to have 3 games a week at some points this season. And so they're going to need some rotation. They're going to need that depth. And so, having a Maciel or a Verfuth or a Jon Bell, who maybe they get the majority of minutes at Revs 2, but they come up and they play a game here or there for Revs 1 and put in a quality performance. That's going to be really key to the Revolution. So it'll be exciting to see them play throughout the season. And as you mentioned, the Open Cup, we don't know if they're in the Open Cup yet, but certainly
they should be.
Yeah, that'll certainly just add on to the taxing schedule. And yes, they should be, considering the first 3 games in the regular season. But regardless,
the first 3 games in the regular season, 2 of them are home games for the Revs. One of them is at Chicago, and then home against DC, and then home against an Atlanta United team that I think might take some time to find their footing. So if it's a stupid way to decide who gets into the Open Cup, but if you're just looking at that schedule, you have to think the Revs should be in the Open Cup based on having 2 of their first 3 games at home. And, I don't think Chicago and DC are the teams that jump off the paper as top tier teams this season to me, at least yet.
No,
I like the chances.
And for full context here, U.S. Open Cup announced their requirements to get in, and I think it's 16 teams get in, and I think the top 8 MLS teams, 8 MLS teams are going in. And basically it's going to be standings through 3 games in the regular season. So just to qualify, though, I mean, you at least need 6 points in my mind. But the Revs can do that. I think if the Revs 7 points through those first 3 games, I don't think is unrealistic for the Revolution. So, and Bruce Arena said if we qualify for it, we're going to try to win it. He said that today at his press conference as well. So, hopefully we get to see some bonus Revolution soccer. Hopefully we get to see this depth in the U.S. Open Cup. But just in general with this whole structure, I mean, it's a really, really big mess. And I don't know, COVID ruins everything. So. Moving on from the U.S. Open Cup, the Arnor Traustason signing was official. We talked about this a lot, I think 2 episodes back in January. I know we covered this a lot. I think it was you and me, Chris. Sean, do you have any reaction to the Traustason signing? Obviously, it'll be a very impactful signing for the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the positions they absolutely needed to upgrade with Christian Pania gone, finding kind of that left midfielder. So I'm curious to see how he adapts to the play in MLS. But on paper, it looks like a really good signing. I think it was the right move to the Revolution. It was a position of absolute need. And, you look at the Revolution's kind of attack now, and it looks really, really solid. A lot of great pieces up there. Whether it all comes together on the field is a question that remains to be seen. I think the Revolution need Buxa to take another step forward. But I think Traustason, next to Carles Gil, Gustavo Bo, there's a lot of firepower on this Revolution team on paper now. Yeah,
absolutely. And if you're thinking to depth, if you want to play that card at all, now we're, behind Traustason, he's got Emma Boateng and Teal Bunbury fighting for minutes there. So that's a lot of competition. And if Traustason wants to get those minutes, he has to make sure that he's elevating his play as well. I think it's going to be a healthy competition there. And it's definitely the position that I am, most looking forward to seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, I've played a few games on FIFA with the new Revs roster, and I got to say Boateng's speed off the bench is a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely.
You always like the fast players. Somi was like a surefire starter for you back when he was on the team, so take that with a grain of salt to our listeners.
Oh, oof.
I will also add too that Traustason's transfer fee was I think $400,000, $500,000, somewhere in that range. He was coming out of contract, so they certainly got a below market value price since he had an expiring contract. But by my math, I mean he's not a designated player. The TAM that the Revs kind of have in their bank should be able to cover his salary easily. There's no word on what his salary is. But Bruce has kind of said, we can still go out and acquire a player in the summer. And by my guesstimate, which, probably isn't worth very much, the Revs certainly can still make a couple of other moves. They still have 3 open roster spots. They look to be senior roster spots. So the Revs, it's not past them to still make another acquisition this summer later on in the year. So I think this signing checks a lot of boxes and still gives the Revolution a lot of flexibility for later in the year.
The one quick note on that I did want to say is I think the Revs are full on international roster spots now, right? Which is kind of the interesting move with Maciel, because he takes up an international and Kiza taking up international roster spots, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting because the Revolution have 2 international roster spots being used by players on the supplemental roster, which you really don't see that much. So it is they probably will have to acquire one. It's really more of a hurdle than a barrier. So the Revs could go out and acquire one for $100,000 in allocation money or something like that later in the year if they do need another international player. But it is a little bit strange to see one team trade away an international roster spot for I think $225,000 in allocation money or something like that, and the Revs are using 2 on players on the supplemental roster. But on the bright side, you can also look at them as having faith in Kiza and also having faith in Maciel, which we talked about a little bit earlier this episode. Even though they're supplemental roster players, which traditionally have not been impactful players, the Revs using international spots and assets on those players just kind of speaks to their faith in them. So it's better than international roster spots going to waste. But you're right, Sean. It's a bit odd to see, going into a season.
I find it interesting too that they're using 2 international roster spots in those guys, and you could potentially read into it that Arena does think they're going to have an impact, because it would be weird to use kind of 2 international roster spots and supplemental players that end up not playing much at all.
Yeah, exactly. And in Maciel's case, you're pretty well set at central midfield. So why would you bring up a player and use an international roster spot on someone you're not going to use? You know what I'm saying? So and same with Kiza. I mean, they could have gotten by without Kiza. They could have acquired a number 9 from really anywhere in USL or any, they probably could have found another one in the draft. But they liked Kiza so much. They wanted to use an international roster spot. I should also add that I don't think the Revolution are really, poor on allocation money or anything like that. So I don't think the Revolution were looking at their international roster spots and saying, we need to turn these into something. You know what I mean? If they were, I think, in a bit more of a budget crunch, I think maybe they, there's more reason to trade those slots, but I don't think that's the case. I think they still have some flexibility to go out and get another player. And if it's an international player, I think they'll go out and just acquire a slot from someone who's not using it. With that being said, too, they can add these guys to international roster spots because Luis Caicedo got his green card, so that's good news. He's a little bit more valuable to the team and no longer takes up an international roster spot, so that is good news on him. And then finally, the schedule was released. Mostly Eastern Conference teams. I think there's 2 Western Conference teams the Revs play. I'd have to look that up. I should have been more prepared for this. Guys, any thoughts on the schedule being released? Chris, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it is very, Eastern Conference heavy, which I don't know. Maybe that's the way MLS is going to be heading anyway down the road once we get so many teams that it doesn't make any sense to try to play every team on both conferences. But yeah, I'm looking ahead. I have a couple of dates circled here. The big one for me, I really want to see August 28th and September 11th. It's like a home and away with New York City FC. And that's, mid to late season there. It's probably going to be a very important match, especially for Eastern Conference standings. And then, we follow that up with going to Philly. So that stretch right there is what I'm really looking at. And that's probably going to be a very pivotal time in the season. So, yeah, that's what I have circled.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's good to be seeing the LA teams in the preseason because they're not going to be seeing them in the regular season.
Yes.
I get why they're playing an Eastern-centric schedule this year, but it is disappointing that we're not seeing more of the West Coast teams. We obviously didn't see much of any of them last year in the regular season, and to see so little of them again this year is a little bit disappointing. I hope that doesn't become the norm going forward, and it is also. To me, a little bit disappointing that the West Coast teams the Revolution do see are FC Dallas and the Colorado Rapids, not exactly the most glamorous of MLS sides. But with that said, anything compared to last year is more variety.
Yes.
Yeah, no Montreal and Philadelphia 7 times. But and Tommy McNamara was asked about it last week, and he mentioned that every game is pretty much a 6-pointer, so it just kind of adds on to the urgency in every single game. So I don't know. I don't particularly like it. I'm kind of with you, Sean. But every game's important. Every game will be a must watch. So I don't know. I guess there's a bit of a plus side. So before we wrap up here, guys, why don't you give out your social media handles? Sean, I'll start with you.
You can follow me at Sean L. Donahue on Twitter.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter as well, or other, social media platforms. It's always at Revs Revolt, or you can find me personal account at Chris Valukis, KrisValukis.
And you can follow us at Revolution Recap. You can also like our Facebook page you can like our Revolution Recap Facebook page. And you can also leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you are listening. We always appreciate reviews, especially the positive ones. Also, if you missed it, Chris and I also were on the Stateside Soccer Show with a New England Revolution season preview where we kind of talked about the roster. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to go listen kind of as a bit of a season preview, but check us out there and give them a follow on social media as well. I believe they're just at Stateside Soccer Show, but they're doing a season preview for every single team in MLS. So if you're interested in Philadelphia, I know they had a Philadelphia episode last week as well. So give them a follow if you could.
It's at Stateside Show for them.
At Stateside Show. Thank you, Chris, for fact checking me there real quick. And that just about does it. Not sure when we will be doing our next episode, but until then, thank you everyone for listening, and go Revs.